Today, I'll be showing you how to create a basic Walkspeed brick, along with making it more advanced and dynamic, being able to randomize and change multiple properties much more efficiently. There will be a model of what I show in this video in the important link section of the description, along with written instructions if it's easier for you. During the video, we'll be creating everything from scratch, so first, make sure you've enabled the Explorer and Properties from the View tab at the top left of the screen, as this is where we'll be creating and adjusting any of the scripts and parts we add into our game. From here, select the workspace inside of the Explorer, click the plus button right next to it, and add a part into your game. You can adjust it as you'd wish, but I'm only going to be changing two things to start. First, I'm going to click on it in the Explorer so I can change its name to Walkspeed Brick. While it's selected, I can go into its properties, and I'm going to make sure the box that says anchored is checked so that if we have it floating in the air or if a player is to walk into it, it'll remain in its position unless we adjust it directly from a script. Next, we can click the plus button on this brick in the Explorer, and then we can add a script inside. In order to change the size of the text in the script editor, you can hold Control if you're on Windows or Command if you're on Mac and scroll up or down. And once you have that, we can get rid of the text in here and get started. The first thing we are going to do is create some variables so we're able to reference these different things in the game much more quickly and efficiently. So I'm going to start by creating the name of the variable. So I'm going to call this first one players. And I'm going to make it equal to game:getService. Inside the parentheses, I'm going to add quotation marks and type in the word players. In this case, we are making a shorter word, which is players, equal to something else in our game. And in this case, it is the players service that contains a list of every single player in the game. We're doing it this way so that if we need to change this later on, instead of changing wherever it says game:getService players, in every other line in the script that we have it, we only need to change what the variable has been made equal to. So we're going to follow the same principle except with this part right here inside of the workspace. And I'm going to show you two different ways you can reference this part. So I'm going to create another variable that is called local brick, and I'm going to make it equal to script.parent. Now this means that whatever brick is the parent of the script, or whatever is containing the script. If we go over here into the Explorer, we can see that the script is directly inside of this part that we created. So that means the script's parent is the Walkspeed brick. If it's a little bit confusing to understand, you can always click on the item and go into the properties section, and you can see the parent property. If you're not comfortable using it yet, you can directly reference it from the game into the workspace or whatever service it is and go down until you find it in there. And in order to do that, you could do something such as saying game.workspace, and then since the Walkspeed brick is on the first layer of the workspace, we could just say .walkspeed brick. If we were to have this in another folder, such as the spawns folder, we would need to make sure we reference that first. So game.workspace.spawns.walkspeed brick. You want to imagine when you're referencing this that it's like you're opening up every single folder and everything you need in order to get to it. So first, we're in the game. If we want to access this inside of the workspace, we need to open it up in the Explorer, so we're opening up the workspace. Next, we're opening up the spawns folder, and after that, we can find it, so then we can finally reference the Walkspeed brick. So there are other ways that we can reference this object, but since we are not using a loop or a function yet, these are the two that we can go with. So I'm going to change this back to script.parent so that if we do change its name or where it is inside of the game, we won't need to change this reference quite yet. So now we have this, we need to create a function that'll end up doing the actions that we want, or in this case, whenever the player touches the part, it'll change their walk speed. So I'm going to start by creating a function, and I'm going to call this function change walk speed. And then I'm going to add these parentheses at the end, and then I'm going to hit enter, and it'll automatically create an end for the function. So that when this is activated, the script will know, okay, once I reach this point, I'm just going to make it stop so that anything else below it will be able to run. But in order to activate this function, we need something listening for whenever a player touches this part. So we need to use what is known as an event. So in this case, we want to reference the brick or the Walkspeed brick. So I'm going to use the variable we created up here. So I'm going to say brick.touch. So whenever the brick is touched, I'm going to connect it to the function that is called change walk speed. So then whenever anything touches it, whether it's a character model or maybe the base plate or a spawn point, it is going to activate the function. And as a result of this, we need to check through the player's service to see if whatever touched it is a player. We're not quite at that point yet because we need to add something into these parentheses right here so that we can figure out in the first place what touched the part. So when we use events, there's some certain data that's passed through whenever it is connected to a function. In the case of a .touched event, it is going to send through into the function whatever touched it. So if I go over here to my character model for an example and I open it up inside of the workspace, let's say I walk over there and I step on it and the right leg touches the Walkspeed brick. That means that the right leg is what is going to be referenced when we activate the function. So we need to have a way in order to reference that object. And this is where we put something into the parentheses at the end here. So I'm just going to call it part. You can change it to whatever you want. It's basically just a placeholder value or a placeholder word for whatever value gets sent through. So what we could do next is then check, okay, so I'm going to check if it's a player. So I'm going to say local player, and by the way, the names of these variables can be whatever you would like to. And I'm going to make this equal to looking through the player's service and seeing if we're able to get a player from the character of part.parent. And the reason we're saying part.parent is because, again, if we go back over here and look inside of the workspace, any of the items directly in the first layer of the character will be one of the potential items that can touch that brick, because the character model itself will not be stepping on the item. It's going to be recognizing one of these individual parts. So we need to be checking for the part's parent. So again, if we click on this, or we could just see that it's directly on the first layer of the character, but otherwise we can click on it, go into the properties, and check the parent property. As we could see, it shows my ROBLOX name there, and that is the name of the character model. So because of that, that's why inside of these parentheses at the end, I'm saying part.parent. Because when this function is activated from the .touched event, part is going to reference whatever part of the character touched the Walkspeed brick, and when we're getting a player, or trying to get a player from their character, we want it to access the character and not like the right leg, the left arm, or any of that. So from here, this is where we can actually check if it is a player before continuing on. So now I'm going to create what is known as an if-then statement. So it's basically if something is true or if, a certain condition has been met. So in this case, if it was a player, then we just want it to continue on. And I'm just going to comment on these ends here just so you know which one will go for what, just so it's easier to stay organized. So if it is a player, then we can get closer to changing their walk speed. So next, I'm going to create a variable for their character. So I'm going to say local character is equal to player.character or player.character added :weight. So I know I could have just said part.parent since that is what is referencing the character, but instead I'm just going to do it directly by saying player.character, or we're going to wait for their character to load into the game just in case this function is activated for some reason when their character does not exist anymore. And the reason we are doing this is so that we can access something inside of it that will allow us to change the player's walk speed, health, jump power, and any of those other properties. And those properties belong to the humanoid. So I'm going to say local humanoid is equal to character, find first child, of class, and of class is like the class name, so it's almost like the category that it falls under. So in this case, we want to say humanoid. So then once we have these references out of the way, we want to again check to make sure that both of these exist. So I'm going to say if character and humanoid. So if both of these are present, then we can continue on, and then with our final step here, we can change the humanoid's walk speed to whatever value we'd like. By default, the character's walk speed is at 16, so just to show you that it is different, I'm going to change this to 100. And now that we have that, we can go over to the game, and we can test it by clicking play at the very top, and I'm going to click the arrow below it and click play here. So now I can see my normal walking speed, which is at 16, but as soon as I step on this part right here or touch it, it's going to make me zoom around a ton and a ton. And now that we have this out of the way, let's see how we can make it more efficient. So we could have one script that'll be applicable to multiple parts in the game and even have a way for it to set different walk speeds. There will be a model of what I show in this video in the important link section of the description, along with written instructions if it's easier for you. During the video, we'll be creating everything from scratch, so first, if you've just made it here, make sure you have the Explorer and Properties enabled from the View tab at the top left of the screen, as this is where we'll be creating and adjusting any scripts or parts in our game. From here, select the workspace inside of the Explorer, click the plus button next to it and add a part into your game. I'm going to create at least 4 so we can use it for this section of the video, so if you would like to duplicate it, you can select it, and if you're on Windows, you can hold Ctrl D, or if you're on Mac, you can hold Command D, and it will create a duplicate version in the same spot. Next, I'm going to rename all 4 of these parts and change its properties just a little bit. So I'm going to click on it in the Explorer, so the very first one I'm going to rename to be Fast Walkspeed. The second one I'm going to rename to be Fast Brick, and I'm going to change both of their brick color properties to be New Yeller. For the third one, I'm going to change this name to be Slow Walkspeed, and the fourth one I'm going to change its name to be Slow Brick, and then I'm going to change the brick color of both of these items to instead be dark orange. Before we start writing the script, I'm going to click the workspace again, click the plus button right next to it, and I'm going to add a folder inside. I'm going to rename this folder to be Walkspeed Bricks, and then I'm going to drag all 4 of these items into that folder. Now that we have that, we can select the server script service, click the plus button next to it and add a script inside. And if you need to change the size of the text in the script editor, you can hold Control if you're on Windows or Command if you're on Mac and scroll up or down. And once you have it at a preference that you like, you can get rid of the text inside and we can get started. So the first thing we are going to do is create a bunch of different variables to reference these different parts in the game and anything else that we need. So I'm going to go back into the script. First thing I'm going to do is say local players is equal to game : get service, and inside of the parentheses I'm going to put quotation marks and type in players. In this case, we are making the word players equal to the service players, which contains a list of every single player currently in the game, and I outlined and explained these variables and referencing them a little bit more in depth at the timestamp on the screen from earlier in the video, so I might go through some of these things a little bit quicker. And we are going to be using this players reference later on to check if whatever steps on these bricks in the game is in fact a player or not. So now we have that, instead of individually referencing every single one of these bricks in the game, we can instead reference the folder that contains all of them. So on the next line, I'm going to create a variable that is called folder. So local folder is equal to workspace.walkspeedbricks. And then after that, I'm going to turn this folder into a table so that we're able to loop through them. So next, I'm going to say local bricks is equal to folder : get children. Now to reference the earlier part of the video really quick, you might remember when we went over here to our character model and we selected one of the parts, we were trying to figure out what the parent of each of these parts were. And we learned that whatever is directly containing the item is its parent. And again, there's also a parent property that can be found while it's selected. So then on the flip side, if we were to select the model and look at it from that perspective, everything on the first layer of that model or whatever is containing, or whatever objects that it is containing, are its children. So that is why inside of the script, we set it to say get children. So if we go back over to that folder, the parent of all of these Walkspeed bricks, or I guess we could just, so it's not confusing, the parent of all of these parts inside of the workspace right here is the folder called Walkspeed bricks. And because that is the case, all of these parts right here is the folder's children. And this is important to understand right before we create the loop so that you know why we're creating a new variable that's getting all of the items directly inside of the folder. So the next thing we could do is actually create the function so we know what's going to be activated first. And a function is going to carry out all of the different actions that we want. In this case, it is going to change the player's walk speed whenever they step on any one of these parts. So I'm going to create a function that is called change walk speed. I'm going to add these parentheses at the end. I'm going to hit enter so that there's an end for it. So once this function is activated, it will know when it needs to end the function. And you do need one of these ends for each if-then statement along with each function or loop. And of course, there's other things too, like coroutines, but we're not going to get into that right now. So now we have this below this function, we are going to create a loop. So we're going to start off by saying for I, comma, item in pairs, and inside of the parentheses, I'm going to put the name of the table, which in this case is bricks. And now I'm going to explain what each of these references are over here, just so you know what we're doing. So inside of a loop, there are two different values here that you can have set to whatever you want. People generally set it to I, v in pairs. And this is because this stands for index and value. Index is basically the position in a loop. And now if we were to use the folder over here as an example, let's say the loop is going from top to bottom inside of this folder. We could say that the part called fast brick is inside of position 1. And then next, fast walk speed would be position 2. Next would be position 3, and then after that would be position 4. So if we were to print out the value that is I, or that we're referring to I in this case, then that is the number that would be printed out. But on the other hand, the V, which is set for value, that is going to be the actual instance or item that is being referenced right here. So I'm going to set this back to item just so it's a little bit easier to understand. So let's say instead we were to print out item.name. In this case, since it's referring to the actual item that's there instead of the position in the loop we're in, it's going to print out the name of each one of these items. So I'm just going to do this really quick. So I'm going to do a quick test run just so I could show you in the output what it is going to print. So I'm going to click over here and I'm just going to click on run. And as we could see over here, it printed out 1 and then it printed out the name of the Walkspeed brick. So if I go over here into the folder, let's open it up. So position 1 in this case was fast walk speed. In position 2, it was fast brick. Position 3 was slow walk speed. And position 4 is slow brick. So now that we have a better understanding of this, we can continue and start to reference these items and then eventually activate the function. And if you have any further questions on that, just in case I butchered the explanation, I'll include some resources in the important link section of the description, just in case it will be useful for you. So now we have this, we are going to check for some certain properties so that we make sure we are only activating the change walk speed function if it is a part. So on the next line, I'm going to create an if-then statement. So basically, if something is true or if something has been met, so if this item that we're referring to inside of the folder is a base part, and you could just do part if you would like to, but base part encompasses other kinds of parts such as mesh parts. So if an item falls into this category, then we can continue and check for more things. So next thing we are going to do is listen for whenever anything touches any of these parts. In order to do that, we are going to use an event. So if an item is a base part, then we're going to say, okay, now we're going to make the script listen for whenever the item is touched. And whenever that happens, we are going to connect it to a function. And in this case, we're going to create a new function just so that we're able to send through multiple values into the function over here at the very top. So normally, and what we did in the earlier part of the video was instead of doing that, we instead put the name of the function we want to activate over at the end, and this would send one value through over to the function that we set up right here. But instead, we're going to connect it and create a brand new one. So we're going to have these parentheses at the end here, and then we are going to add a new end so that once this function is activated, it'll know where it needs to end, and I'm going to label these really quick. And if you're curious why we have this extra closing parentheses at the end of this one, instead of having it for all of them or none of them, when we are connecting an event to a brand new function, when we're basically creating a new function, we need to have one of these parentheses here to close off the connection that we made. So as you can see, for the function, we do have these two parentheses at the end here, but we don't have that extra one that we normally would have had if we just did something such as this, item.touched, connect, and then the name of the function. So as we can see at the end here, we have this closing parentheses. So because we want the entire function to be encompassed within this, we need to have that closing parentheses after the end. Now we have that out of the way, just in case that was confusing. I'll see if I can find something, a resource for that in the description as well. And now that we have that, we can activate the change walk speed function, and actually, we need to have a way to reference some different data that was sent through. So sorry for going all over the place right now. I'm going to try to bring everything back to the center so that everything is easy to understand. So whenever an event is activated, so in this case, we are using a .touched event, it is going to send some data through into any function that we connect it to. And we can put that within the parentheses of the function. So in this case, anything that touches the item, or in this case, it's going to be any 4 of these parts, we can reference whatever touched it by saying part. And those could be other things in the workspace, such as the base plate. It could be any of the parts of the character, so you could have it the arms, the legs, the torso, the head. Any of that will be able to be referenced when we say part right here. So because of this, we want to send it over to the change Walkspeed function, and we are also going to send the item in question, whichever one was touched. So the first thing I'm going to send through is part, and the next thing I'm going to send through is the Walkspeed brick that was touched. So I'll say item because that is what we referenced it here inside of the loop. Now, just in case this loop didn't catch every single item that was inside of the Walkspeed bricks folder, or let's say if there are new parts created in the middle of the game, we need to make sure that those parts are also accounted for. So we are going to create another function right in between here. In this case, I am also going to be referencing the folder again, but instead of the one that we turned into a table, I'm just going to be talking about the normal folder. So I'm going to start over here by saying folder.child added. So whenever a new item is added into the folder, we're going to connect it to a new function. And now with this event, the value that can be referenced inside the parentheses here is going to be that new item. So if we were to go over here into the folder and we click the plus button, and let's say we added a script inside of it, this is the new item that would be referenced inside of the function. So now that we have that, we can check for some values or some different properties like we did over here. So the first thing I want to do is the exact same. I'm going to check to make sure that item is in fact a base part. And if it is a base part, then we're going to do the same thing with connecting a function from a .touched event. So I'm going to change this to make sure it says new item.touched. We're going to connect it to the new function. Now let's make sure that we have our ends here. And then once that happens, we could do the same sort of thing. We could activate the change Walkspeed function, send through the part that touched the item along with the item itself. And just so we can differentiate between these two inside of the output, just so I could show you that these both end up working, let's add some print statements. So for this first print statement, I'm going to say this was the child added function. And for the other one instead, I'm going to say that it was the loop that was activated. So I'll say loop activated, and for a top one, I'll say child added function activated. And then I'll label these here really quick. So now we have these things out of the way, we can continue on to the change Walkspeed function. And the first thing we're going to do is add some parameters into the parentheses over here so that we can reference the different arguments or values that we sent through from these other functions. So in this case, since there are two different values that we're sending through, we're going to make sure there's at least two different parameters. I'm going to name the first one as part and the second one as item. And from here, we can start to check for certain things and then eventually get down to the point where we are changing the player's walk speed. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a variable that is called player, look through the player's service and see if we can get a player from the character. And that character would be referenced by saying part.parent, because again, whenever something touches one of those parts right there, let's say it is something from our character, let's say it's the left arm, its parent will be the character model. So we want to be checking if this model belongs to someone's character. So then on the next line, we can then check, okay, if it was a player, then we can continue on and make some more things happen. So if it was in fact a player, then we are going to reference their character by saying local character is equal to player.character or player.character added :wait, just in case their player's character doesn't exist when this function is being activated. And this is just so we can make sure it's more accurate with referencing the player's character. And after that, we want to reference their humanoid, because the humanoid is what allows us to change those different properties such as health, walk speed, jump power, and all the other things that you will see on the screen right now if I remember to put it there. So now we can type in local humanoid is equal to character :find first child of class. So it's basically going to be the category that it is. And we're going to put inside of the parentheses in quotation marks humanoid. So then, just like the function from the first script that we created in this video, we are going to check if the character exists and if the humanoid exists, and if that is the case, we can continue. But instead of just setting the humanoid's walk speed right away, we're going to check for some different things. We could check for certain properties to set a different walk speed value. So the first thing I'm going to do is by checking what the brick color of the objects are. So both of these over here on the left side have a brick color of new yellow. The two on the right side have a brick color of dark orange. So I'm going to start here by saying if item.brickcolor, and again, item is what we use to reference the part that was sent through from the functions below. So if that item's brick color is equal to, so two equal signs, because we want to check if it is equal to something rather than making a word or value equal to something else. So if it is equal to brickcolor.new, in this case we're going to do new yeller, then we want to set the humanoid's walk speed to something faster, because those are what we set the fast brick and fast walk speed bricks to. So we're going to change the humanoid's walk speed to be made equal to something like 100. However, if this isn't the case, we can set up an else if statement. So basically this is going to check, okay, if the item's brick color is new yeller, then this will happen. If it was not new yeller, then we can check for a different condition. So in this case, I could say else if item.brickcolor is equal to brickcolor.new dark orange, then instead we can change their humanoid walk speed to a different value. So humanoid.walk speed is equal to something like, let's just say 5. And again, do make sure that you have properly capitalized and spelled these properties. And in this case with a capital W and a capital S, or else it might not work. And I'll show you how we can make this even more random, and even checking for like the items.name as well. But in this case, let's just start it off with this. So now I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to click the button close to the top and click play here. And as we can see at the very bottom, we've already activated the loop 4 times to account for these 4 different objects that are inside of the Walkspeed bricks folder. And if I step on this first one over here, which is one of the fast ones, we'll see that I am moving around very fast. It seems like I forgot to anchor all of these parts. And then if I walk on the second one over here, you'll see that my character becomes very, very slow. I'll show it with this one next to show you that it works for all of them. So that one works, and then this one is the final one, I'm pretty sure. So now I'm also going to show you that the other function over here works, which is the child added function, because this loop activated print statement was being printed from line 44, but now we need to see where line 32 is printed. So I'm going to go over here, back to the game, and I'm going to click the button at the very top that says current client. And this will swap us to the server-sided view so that we are able to see things such as the server storage and make changes that everyone will be able to see. So in this case, I'm going to go over into the workspace. I'm going to open up the Walkspeed bricks folder, and I'm going to add a new part inside. As we can see, oh man, oh sorry, it activated a few times because it landed on these parts. So let me do that again. So I'm going to click the plus button. I'm going to add a part inside. As you can see, the child added function was activated. But then if I was to walk on this right now, it's not going to change my walk speed at all because we don't have anything set up for parts that don't have these 2 colors over here. So let's go and change the script around a little bit more so we can account for those. But first, actually, I'm just going to show you that this does work if you change the item's name. So I'm going to do if item.name, let's say it is equal to fast walk speed. We'll make it equal to 100. And then for the other one, we'll say if the item's name is equal to, let's just say slow brick, we'll make it equal to 5. So that means that it should be this part right over here and this part over here. So the ones on the edges. So let's go back and play here. So that means that if I was to walk onto these 2 in the center here, it's not going to do anything because their names are different. But if I walk on this one, I'm going to start zooming around really fast. If I walk on this slow brick over here, it's not going to do anything, but this one does. And that is because, again, we were checking inside of that script for these different names, which was fast walk speed and slow brick. So now let's go back over here and account for a few more things. Now in here, we can add an else statement. Else is going to account for any time when the other conditions we set above are not met. So if the item's name is not fast walk speed, and if it is not slow brick, then it's not going to set their walk speed to 100 or 5. It is going to go to whatever is set up in the else. So I'm going to keep these examples here for right now. So we know that it's the parts on the edges that are being looked for. So, but if I put in this else statement, like let's say we'll put the humanoid's walk speed instead, or here, let's adjust one of the other properties just to show you that it'll work. I'm going to set instead the humanoid's jump power to be a different value. I actually don't know what it's at right now by default, so I'm just going to change this to be like 200. This is probably going to be too high, but I guess we'll see how that works. Oh, and whoops, I need to set this to an equal sign and not a double equal sign. And then once I show you guys this really quick, I'll show you how you can make it a random walk speed. So in this case, if we go over here, I'm going to step on, let me jump really quick too. So this is my normal jump. It's probably going to send me super high. So first, if I walk on this one, it's going to send me super fast. If I walk on this one on the edge, it's going to make me walk really slow. But then if I walk on any of these in the middle, we'll see that my jump height has been changed quite a bit. And it didn't change my speed at all. So if I were to go onto this part over here, you'll see that my speed didn't change, but my jump power changed because we set that up in the else statement. Because none of those items match up with these if-then statements that we set up over here. And maybe I'll just include it in here too, just so we can experiment with having it randomized. So instead, I'm going to set the humanoid jump power to 100. What I'm also going to do is set the humanoid's walk speed to a random value. So here, I'm going to type in something similar to earlier, which is humanoid.walkspeed is equal to, but instead of just having the number, I'm going to use math.random. So this is going to create a random number within a specific range that we set up. So we're going to have two numbers in here. We're going to have the lowest possible number that it could be and the highest possible number that it could be. So it'll choose a random number within this range. And just so we know what this value is, I'm going to create a variable that'll say local random walk speed is equal to math.random, and I'll just grab what was over here. So math.random 1 to 500, and we are going to make the walk speed value equal to random walk speed. And while we do that, I am also going to print that out or warn it in the output, whatever that random walk speed is. So now that we have this, we could see how random it really is. And I'm also going to experiment with this to also show you that it will work with any new items that we add into the game. So over here, this is my normal jump height right here, normal speed. I'm going to go over to the server at the very top. I'm going to select the folder, and I'm going to add a new part inside. I'm going to move this one over here. I'm going to swap back to the client. I'm going to step on this brick over here just so I start walking really slow, and we're going to see what happens as soon as I step on this. Okay, so I got changed a few times there. So if I scroll back over, we'll see that the child added function was activated. So that part did work. As we can see here, because we stepped on it multiple times very, very quickly, it changed our walk speed quite a few times. So first it was 306, then 271, 28, and it kept changing back and forth. And now there is a way that we can combat this so that it doesn't do it too frequently, and that is by using debounce. And I know maybe I'm overwhelming you guys with too many things, but well, hopefully I'm going at a decent enough pace. And again, I'll include some resources in the important links section for a bunch of this stuff as well. So right now we are going to incorporate debounce, and this is almost like a delay so that things aren't activated too quickly. And I'm going to show you this example with these functions over here at the bottom instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two different variables. I'm going to start with local debounce1, and I'm going to make this equal to false. So this is just going to be a placeholder variable, and the two values we're going to have it interchangeable between is false and true. Then down here for this one, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Local debounce2 is equal to false. So then I'm going to go into the function right here. So I'm going to include this inside of the .touched event, just so that it will be a little bit more effective, and then I might be able to explain it a little bit better. So I'm going to start here by saying if debounce1 is equal to false, then we're going to let this stuff happen right here. And yes, that one stays there. So all right, whenever the new item.touched event is run and whenever it activates the function, the first thing it's going to do is check if debounce1 is equal to false. And the reason that this is important is because we can then check, or we can then change inside of here, we can change that value. So if I was to change debounce1 to be made equal to true whenever this condition is met, then that means if this .touched event activates the function again before debounce1 is set back to false, it will not be able to activate this function down here. And if this is a little bit confusing here, let's see if I can explain it a little bit better. So first below this, I'm going to make debounce1 equal to false again. So right here, so let's say when the server starts up, debounce1 is going to be made equal to false. Whenever one of the parts in the game are touched, it's going to run this function. The first thing it will do is check if this debounce1 variable is false. If that is the case, then it is going to make it equal to true. And after that, it is then going to activate the function. It's going to run through the function, check for all of these different things, and once the function is done, we're going to set dbounce1 equal to false again. The reason why this is important is because if this .touched event activates the function again, before dbounce1 is set back to false, this condition will not be met. Because this code here is within the dbounce1 if-then statement, and oh my god, I just completely butchered that there, but I'll fix that up. But because this code is within this if-then statement, this is only going to run if dbounce1 is equal to false in that given moment. So this allows us to set up some delay without just manually saying, oh, I'm just going to wait 2 seconds before doing that. Because if we were to do something like this, wait 2 seconds, that means all of those inputs would still count. It's just going to take 2 seconds longer for everything else below it to happen. So dbounce can be really effective and useful in some of these different scenarios. So I'm going to do the same thing over here with this function. So I'm just going to say, if dbounce2 is equal to false, then we're going to make dbounce equal to true, or dbounce2 equal to true. I'm going to move this down here, change this, and then add dbounce2 is equal to false so that this condition will be able to be met again. And I'll add this one after, or I'll just paste it here for right now and fix it up a little bit later. So now we have that. The function should be activated a little bit less, and of course when we touch any of the Walkspeed bricks in there, it's still probably going to print out quite a few times because we're not adding a significant amount of delay, but it'll be better than what we had it earlier. So again, I'm just going to test it a little bit by adding in a part here. Going to go back. I'm going to step on it, and as you can see, this time, well, this time it was only activated 3 times. I did step on the corner a little bit, but it definitely wasn't as frequent as it was before. And we could always do the same thing if we add it to the top here for this function. And let's just say I do that really quick just to see if it has much of a difference. So we'll just do local dbounce is equal to false. We'll add it to the very top here. If dbounce is equal to false, then we're going to make dbounce equal to true. And then we're going to have this all the way at the very end here. I'm just going to indent all of these by a line, as well as everything over here. And then I am going to make dbounce. Actually, let me move these over one really quick. And I'm going to make sure that we are setting dbounce to be made equal to true within the if dbounce is equal to false then statement. And this is because we want to make sure that, if dbounce was in fact false, and this condition is met and it keeps on going with the rest of the code, that at the end of it, we make it equal to true again. Because if we were to do this below this if-then statement, and that means that in certain situations where this condition is not met, and basically everything in the function is skipped, the only line of code that would be run is anything outside of all this. So if I were to put something here such as print hi, this is the only thing that would run when the function is activated. And then dbounce will be set to true right away, and it would kind of make adding dbounce a little bit pointless. So we want to make sure that that is found within the if-then statement. Sorry, I've covered so many more things in this than I initially anticipated. So hopefully it wasn't too difficult to grasp. And again, I will have a model of everything I show in the video in the important links section of the description. I'll also comment on every single line too, just in case it'll be easier for you to follow along with. And I'm going to move this over here. Let's test it one more time. Let's see if it's any different. So actually that ended up breaking something. I'm not sure what it broke, but if I go back in here, I'll probably see what it was pretty soon. Oh, I just realized it's because I was setting it back to be true instead of false. So sorry. I'll try and make a note of that as soon as I write it in the video, so that so you guys know what to set it to. So yeah, now that we have that, let's go back in here and let's try it one more time. Let's go in here, click the Walkspeed bricks folder. Let's add a new part in. Let's go over here and let's step on it. And as we can see here, whoa, I'm running in. I got set super fast, and it did activate quite a few times still, but if you implement it a little bit differently for your own needs, instead of just adding, the basic if-then statement, you could add specific delay for a certain player for a certain amount of time. Like you could add that player's name to a table and after a few seconds you could remove it. I could cover something like that in a future tutorial. But yeah, since you've made it this far, post a comment down below to suggest what tutorial I should create next in this series, along with any feedback about what I could do to make these tutorials more enjoyable and easier for you to learn from. Remember to subscribe and check out my Roblox Studio tutorial series that will have dozens of other useful videos through the card at the top right of the screen or via the playlist in the description below. I apologize if I was everywhere in this video explaining maybe way too many things, but I haven't created a tutorial in a month and I'm ready to get back into things. So I hope this was useful. Post any comments down below too if you have any questions, and I will try my best to answer all of them. And with that said, hope that you guys have a great rest of your day and night, whatever time it is where you are, and I hope to see you next time. So bye bye, have a good day.